Let me, speaking of buzzing and 15,000 volts, let me hop on to a bit of a different subject and ask you a few questions about something that I found very interesting in your past, and tell me the why behind it, and then the what was your experience in Undercover Boss. Now that was a phenomenal episode. When I watched the show, it was, very relevant to a lot of my experience. So tell me about your experience in that whole program.
Sure. Yeah, we're not really confident how we came on their radar, but we had a short little NBC Today show spot on the Neon Museum, and we think maybe the folks at CBS were watching NBC that day, which is hard to imagine. It's like a Ford dealer driving a Chevrolet, but nonetheless, you understand where I'm coming from. My phone rang, and I said, "Hi, this is CBS calling functionally. You ever heard of the show?" I said, "Of course I have." And they said, "Are you interested in talking to us about being on the show?" I said, "Well, yeah, of course, I'd love to do that." And they said, "Well, let's send a non-disclosure over." So I first signed my life away, saying I couldn't say to anybody. And what really took more than a year and a half to culminate in an agreement to be on the show, not only an agreement to be on the show, but functionally an audition to be on the show. See, the producers want to find a company and an organization that they think will sell advertising, for TV commercials. And so I'm sure they talk to a lot of companies, and when they get to meet them and get to know them, they realize that it's just kind of a, lackluster and nothing interesting to see. So we queued up. They sent a film crew out under the guise of completely something else, filmed our people, filmed our operations. We pushed a lot of stuff their way in terms of photography, in terms of just information. And then it came down to a demo reel where the producers actually put a short little, maybe a 3 or 4 minute synopsis of who we are and what we do. And they spun it up to the executives of CBS for a final approval. And we did not know if we were going to be approved. I mean, they said, we get no's all the time. So we'll put our good efforts in, and it came back as, okay, we're done. We'd like to film in 6 weeks. And then we're like, oh, crazy. It came down really fast. The way they presented it to us was it was going to be a 10-day filming commitment. And if you've seen an episode of the show, there are gifts given to employees who are in need. And they said we as a company would have to come up with the money for those gifts. And there was a minimum of $200,000. They said, you got to at least spend $200,000 on your employees in order to make this episode, meaningful. And we said, okay, we agreed functionally to $200,000. And they covered up production costs, which were anywhere from $300,000 to $400,000.
Wow.
Which we finally got into it. It ended up being, it was 10 days of filming, but it functionally took half of my day for about 6 months. And you think, how could that be? Well, you have no idea. They wanted images and details about every little thing, every scene they shot. There was wardrobe questions from my own wardrobe and from their wardrobe. And so when we finally got into it and filming it, I just had no idea how complicated film production was. And they told me going in, they've only used 1/40th of their footage.
Oh, so wow.
They shoot 40 minutes, they use a minute. So we would be on a job site for 4 hours, and that segment would last 2-3 minutes tops. And so all that footage and all that editing was a big, big part of it. The big question that seems to come to me with Undercover is, is it real? I mean, is it? Come on. And the sad story is let me say it a different way. They interviewed, under the guise of something else, they interviewed upwards of 90 employees, many of whom I did not know well, and some of whom I did not know at all. And we have a franchise operation. We haven't talked about that, but they found a franchise worker in Chicago. I'd never met him. Of course, I know the owners, but I'd never met him. So walking up to a worker in Chicago, I had no fear of all being recognized by him. But everyone else, they went to unbelievable lengths to keep everybody thinking about something else and not thinking about me. And as they dressed me up, they kind of did like a mohawk thing with my hair and colored it purple.
Kind of like the color of our background screen right
Yeah,
now.
kind of, yeah.
I think
Close
so.
to.
It's a good thing you're not in that costume today, because you would have melted into the background.
Right.
Regardless.
So, yeah, and so everyone was distracted by features that I had with my wardrobe and with my hair, with my face, and it completely threw them off. And so I can tell you honestly, these employees, when we told them who I was finally, they were all shocked. They had no idea. Because this film production company shows up with 30 people. They tell them they're filming a completely different thing. They film all this extra footage related to what they say they were filming. And then they edit out the stuff for the show that they use for Undercover. I couldn't believe how amazing that whole thing was. And so at the end of it all, there were some really important lessons to learn, primarily that I really wish I really wish they would have recognized me, frankly. I wish I'd have known my employees better. They all had very heart-wrenching, gripping stories that, really kind of makes you emotional when you think about it. Mm-hmm. We have a gentleman who's homeless, who had basically moved moved from Michigan and come west, lost his van, put his family in a shelter, and was living on the street when he got a job with YESCO. And because of his job with YESCO, he's able to basically survive. And his son has a heart condition. And I have another coworker who lost his son in an ATV accident. They were out in the hills riding around, and his other son was with him when his son died. And it's just horrible. And his life travail. So anyway, I got to know these stories of these employees, and what really comes to mind is we're surrounded by people who have a very rich history and a very rich background with a lot of really strong, firm beliefs and a lot of really strong principles. And we need to do a better job of getting to know the people that surround us, and we need to put stock in their and put great momentum behind their ideas and thoughts and their vision, not only for their own careers, but for their departments and for their vision for where they see the company going. And so I think that's the big message that comes from Undercover is we can do a much better job of learning about the people around us. And it may be our own family members. We haven't had those important discussions. It may be our neighbors we may have never met, or it may be people we work with, either employees or suppliers or even customers. We don't take the time to get to know them. And I think that's what the message of Undercover is.
Yeah, that was, it was such a beautiful episode. And, the conversations that you had with Eric, the painter, the shop foreman for the painting the department, I thought was really interesting, that it wasn't just a financial contribution that you gave to someone at the end of the show and you walked away. You really did, like with Sal as well, your franchise location in Chicago. He thought it was important for safety and training to put a program together. So you engaged him to develop that program. You worked with Eric to improve processes and how to improve, communication with the company and the culture and things like that. So it's not just, okay, here's some money and off we go, next show. So 5 years later, how do you feel that has changed the culture at YESCO, that experience?
Right. So from the employee's perspective, when they start giving me feedback Undercover about processes and things, there became immediately a high level of accountability with the company to make some adjustments in what we did, and then to listen even further to what needed to happen. And we made those adjustments, significant adjustments. And the task going forward is, now that we've kind of, done that, and we're shown as a company who maybe perhaps listened and maybe initiated change, to keep that rolling forward, where people feel like they have a voice and that they have a say in their environment. A lot of the things that I heard, I didn't like hearing. And under the pressure of the cameras rolling, under the pressure of trying to maintain a persona and a person that I was not, I had to remember who I wasn't really. I was somebody else, right?
Yes.
Plus, teaching me a job. Plus, I was hearing all the stuff about the company. There was 4 or 5 things going on at the same time. And I don't remember having been under such pressure. It was it was something else. And with that came a lot of emotion and a lot of deep feelings of kinship toward these employees and a responsibility back to the organization to make the changes we need to. And, just with that too, I think it put a, first off, I think from an industry perspective, it was wonderful to have our industry in that season and to have Undercover Boss and CBS highlight what we all do. I think that's fantastic. And to be selected as a company in Utah, which is a relatively small state, we're not New York, we're not California. Utah's a population of 3 million. It's just not that big of a state. So for the state to be recognized, for the industry to be recognized, that was really a fun part of it for us.
It is an impactful business. That's, such an important story, as you're saying, for not just for the industry, but for the company and as an example for other companies too. Our industry is filled with a lot of smaller businesses, family-run businesses, that started maybe 2-3 generations ago, and maybe not have grown as large as YESCO, but still the growth is consistent, and there's a pride in that business and that industry. And it's such a visible product that people don't, when you say you work in the sign industry, people think, oh, those big traffic signs that we see on the highways and things like that. No, it's like often we'll use Las Vegas as a reference. No, like the signs you see in Las Vegas, or retail signs, or it's then you see, excuse the pun, the light bulb go off and people think, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. But there's such an artisanship still, in spite of all the technologies there. The folks that you spent time with in your shops, there's still shops full of very talented and very hardworking people that still are responsible for putting all these bits and pieces together into, a spinning, flashing, illuminated sign that brings people to a brand store. So it was really, as you're saying, nice to see that highlighted in a national show, and now available internationally. Anybody that wants to watch this, it's I think it was a great experience to watch it, and I agree.
Well, thank you. And I think culminating all our thoughts and feelings, the one book, because we as a group, as a leadership team, as individual, we're reading books and keeping up to date. The book that really kind of tuned into my emotions coming out of Undercover was a book called Turn This Ship Around by David Marquet. And he's a submarine captain who was assigned to run the worst operating submarine in the US Navy. And he took over and he instituted some changes that were very vital, that put the faith in his people to make important decisions. And if there's one thing that comes out of this, it's a fantastic book about how leadership can transform groups and how important the voice of the individual is, in terms of making important decisions, like don't run the nuclear submarine aground. Kind
of important.
He says, when you're captain of a submarine, he had no time to prepare to run the submarine, and he had trained for another submarine, and he was not trained to be a captain of that ship, a commander of that ship. He wasn't, and so he had to trust his people. And so, kind of comes from that perspective, and I think the message of Undercover is well aligned with that book. Turn this ship around. So I'd recommend that.
So, as part of